They say my profession is lowly. My mother considers me a mere seamstress. She and my precious little sister Lexi think they can force me to work for free, draining my labor for their vain dreams under the spotlight. They want the most magnificent evening gown for Lexi to shine at the Miss State pageant? Fine. I'll make her shine. Lexi is about to have a performance where she literally unleashes herself in a way television history will never forget. The bell above my studio door chimed at exactly 2 in the afternoon. I didn't need to look up from the silk chiffon. I was hand-finishing to know who it was. The overpowering cloud of Chanel No. 5, the kind that screams, "I'm trying too hard," announced my mother's arrival before her heels clicked across my worn hardwood floor. "Harper, darling." Deborah's voice dripped with that particular honey-coated tone she reserved for when she wanted something. "We're here." I set down my needle, carefully securing the delicate fabric, and looked up. There they stood. My mother, Deborah Vance, in her crisp white blazer and designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and my sister Lexi, 23 years old, and stunning in that effortless way that comes from a lifetime of being told you're beautiful. Lexi wore athleisure like it was haute couture, her honey blonde hair cascading in perfect waves that she definitely hadn't earned through good hair care, just good genes and expensive salon visits. They surveyed my tiny studio with barely concealed disdain. I watched Lexi's nose wrinkle slightly as she took in the cramped space. Bolts of fabric leaning against every available wall. My ancient sewing machine that wheezed but still worked. The dress forms that had seen better decades. And the single window that let in just enough natural light to make the whole space feel more shabby than shabby chic. "How are you, sweetie?" "How are you, sweetie?" Mom asked, though her eyes were already scanning my work table, clearly searching for a clear spot to set down whatever she'd brought. "Busy," I replied, gesturing to the 3 dresses in various stages of completion hanging near my workspace. "I have Mrs. Patterson's daughter's prom dress due Friday, a bridesmaid alteration set for the weekend, and—" "That's wonderful that you're keeping busy," Mom interrupted smoothly, sliding an open fashion magazine onto the only clear corner of my work table. Her crimson manicured finger, fresh from the salon, no doubt pointed directly at the cover. "But look at this, sweetie. Look at the sophistication of this piece." I leaned forward despite myself. The gown on the cover was breathtaking. A Valentino masterpiece. Emerald green with intricate beadwork that probably took a team of artisans hundreds of hours to complete. The bodice was structured perfection, and the skirt flowed like water frozen mid-cascade. It was the kind of dress that graced red carpets and museum exhibitions. "This is exactly the level Lexi deserves," Mom continued, her voice taking on that familiar, controlling lilt that always made my stomach knot. "I don't want you to copy it exactly, that would be tacky. I just want Lexi's dress to be as grand and magnificent as this, if not more so. Emerald green, of course, for the Miss State pageant next month." She paused, letting the weight of her expectations settle over me like a heavy blanket. "And you will put your all into making this for her as a gift for entering the competition, okay? Your sister needs to be the most outstanding one there." A gift. Of course it would be a gift. Not a commission, not a paid project, a gift. As if my time, my skill, and my materials were just family favors to be dispensed at will. "Mom, I started, but Lexi cut me off with a dramatic sigh. "Oh, come on, Harper." She perched on the edge of my work table, right next to Mrs. Patterson's delicate silk, making me wince. "You can't seriously be thinking of saying no." "I have 3 paying clients," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice level. "People who have already put down deposits and are counting on me to—" "How are those rags you sew for common customers more important than my future?" Lexi's perfectly glossed lips formed a pretty pout that had probably won her a dozen pageant crowns. "You should feel honored to custom make a dress for the future Miss State. I'll advertise for you when I get there. Think of the exposure." The word rags hit me like a slap. I felt something crack inside my chest, a hairline fracture in whatever was left of my tolerance. But worse than Lexi's dismissiveness was the way that sentence, that specific, entitled, cruel sentence, pulled me backward through time like I was caught in a riptide. Suddenly, I wasn't 30 years old, standing in my cramped studio. I was 18, standing in front of the Bank of America on a sweltering August morning, holding a printed statement in hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Account balance, $0. The college fund my grandmother had set up for me, $50,000 carefully saved and invested over years, meant specifically for my education, had been completely emptied. Every single cent. Gone. I had been so excited that morning. I'd already been accepted to Parsons School of Design in New York. I'd spent months preparing my portfolio, working part-time at a dry cleaner to save extra money, dreaming of the life I'd build. My grandmother had made me promise, before she passed, that I would use that money to pursue my passion. "You have a gift, Harper," she'd told me, her wrinkled hands holding mine. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But my mother was listed as a co-signer on the account. A formality, I'd thought. A safety measure. When I'd confronted her, Deborah had been in the kitchen, drinking iced tea and looking through a catalog of children's pageant costumes. Lexi, 12 years old at the time, had been practicing her walk in the living room, her little feet in kitten heels clicking across the floor. "Oh, honey, sit down," Mom had said, her voice so calm, so reasonable. "I can explain everything. You know your sister has a real shot at the regional title this year. We needed a new car. The old one was on its last legs, and how else was I supposed to drive Lexi to all her competitions? And the entry fees, the coaching, the outfits. These things add up." "But that was my college fund," I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Grandma left that for me, for school. And I'm your mother. I know what's best for this family." She'd reached across the table, taking my hand in hers with that same tender touch that always made me doubt my own anger. "Harper, sweetheart, you're so talented. You don't need some fancy, expensive school in New York to prove that. The design industry is brutal. Do you know how many people graduate and never work a day in their field? I'm protecting you from wasting years of your life and ending up disappointed. But I want to... Listen to me." Her voice had gone soft, almost pleading. "Lexi has something special. Real star quality. If we invest in her now, if she wins the titles she's capable of winning, our whole family's future changes. You'll be the sister of Miss State, maybe even Miss America one day. Doesn't that sound better than struggling in some overpriced New York apartment, competing with thousands of other designers?" She'd squeezed my hand. "You're the smart one, Harper. I need you to support your sister. That's what family does. We lift each other up. And think of it this way, when Lexi succeeds, we all succeed. You'll benefit from her fame too." I'd been 18. I'd wanted so desperately to believe that my mother loved me, that she had my best interests at heart, that this sacrifice would somehow be worth it. So, I'd swallowed my dreams. I'd enrolled in community college instead, taking basic design courses, while working full-time. I'd taught myself advanced techniques through library books and online tutorials. I'd built my client base one bridesmaid dress and one alteration at a time, working out of a spare bedroom, then a shared studio space, and finally barely affording this cramped, poorly lit room I currently called my business. And Lexi? She'd won her regional title that year. And the next. And the next. The trophies lined the shelves in Mom's house like a shrine. But Miss State had always eluded her. She'd placed second twice, third once. Close, but never quite there. Now here we were, 11 years later. I was 30. Supposed to be established. Supposed to be stable. Instead, I was drowning in credit card debt, behind on my studio rent, and watching younger, better-connected designers pass me by because I'd never had the education or the network that Parsons would have given me. And my mother and sister stood in my studio, demanding another gift. Another sacrifice. Another piece of my soul offered up on the altar of Lexi's ambitions. "Harper?" Mom's voice snapped me back to the present. She was looking at me with concern now, her head tilted in that way that made her seem so caring. "Are you okay, sweetie? You look pale." I realized I'd been staring at the magazine for too long, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat. "I really don't have time. The pageant is in a month, and a dress like this would take..." "You'll make time." Lexi's voice had gone cold, her pageant smile vanishing. She stood up from the work table, crossing her arms. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. I'm your sister. This is important to me." "Your paying clients are important too," I said weakly, hating how defensive I sounded. "Those people can wait, or go somewhere else." Lexi flipped her hair over her shoulder. "If you don't finish the dress for me, don't bother being my sister anymore." The words landed like stones. I felt my breath catch. "Lexi!" Mom's voice held a gentle reproach, but there was something calculated in her expression. She turned to me, and suddenly her eyes were shining with unshed tears, a trick she'd perfected over the years. Don't be angry with her, Harper. She's just worried. This competition means everything to her. She's been preparing for months. Mom crossed the small space and took both my hands in hers. Her skin was soft, moisturized, warm. Her grip was tender. You will finish the dress on time, right? Her voice was barely above a whisper, intimate, like we were sharing a secret. I chose you to design the dress for her because I trust your skills. You're so talented, sweetheart. I know you can create something magnificent. There it was. The look, the tone, the particular combination of maternal affection and expectation that had been manipulating me for over a decade. My mother had never yelled at me, never called me names, never been overtly cruel. She'd just wrapped her demands in so much love and sweetness that refusing felt like betrayal. And despite everything, despite the stolen college fund, despite 11 years of watching my dreams shrink while Lexi's expanded, despite knowing with absolute certainty that this was wrong, I felt myself weakening. Because deep down, in a place I hated to acknowledge, I still wanted her approval. I still wanted to believe that maybe, this time, if I just did this one more thing, she'd really see me. Really value me, really love me the way she so obviously loved Lexi. I swallowed hard. I need to finish the orders for my current clients first. Of course. Mom's face lit up like I'd just handed her the moon. That's my responsible girl. How long do you need? 2 days, I heard myself say. Come back in 2 days. I'll take Lexi's measurements then, and we can discuss the design details. Perfect. Lexi's smile returned, bright and triumphant. See? I knew you'd come through. You always do. They left in a cloud of perfume and satisfied chatter, already discussing hair and makeup plans. The bell chimed as the door closed behind them, and suddenly my studio felt even smaller than before, the walls pressing in like I was being buried alive. I sank into my desk chair and stared at the magazine they'd left behind. The Valentino gown stared back at me, beautiful and impossible. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Just checking in. So excited to see the dress on Friday. I looked at the half-finished prom dress hanging near my machine, the bridesmaid alterations waiting in garment bags. The dinner dress I'd promised to a regular client for next week, and I resolved to finish every single stitch within the next 48 hours. I would sacrifice my sleep to clear my schedule for Lexi, but I refused to let my paying clients suffer just because my family had come first. Again. Always. 2 days felt like 2 minutes. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, finishing Mrs. Patterson's daughter's prom dress at 3 a.m, subsisting on cold coffee and the kind of determination that comes from pure spite. The bridesmaid alterations were done. The dinner dress was hemmed. Every paying client had their order ready or nearly complete. I told myself it was professionalism. Really, it was the last shred of dignity I was clinging to. If I was going to sacrifice my time and energy for free, at least I wouldn't fail my actual clients in the process. When the bell chimed at exactly 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, I was ready. Sort of. I'd cleared my main work table, set out my measuring tape, and even made a pot of decent coffee, though I doubted my mother and sister would touch it. Harper. Mom breezed in wearing a different designer outfit, this time a flowing floral blouse. Lexi followed, glued to her phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Hey, I said, gesturing to the cleared table. Ready when you are. Lexi finally looked up from her phone, glancing around the studio with fresh disdain. It's so cramped in here, and it smells like an old fabric or something. It smells like work, I replied flatly. Should we get started with measurements? Yes, let's. Mom clapped her hands together. Lexi, honey, stand over here. Harper, you'll need to get every measurement perfect. This dress has to fit like it was painted on. Lexi stood like a mannequin, occasionally checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Mom hovered, offering commentary that ranged from obvious to irritating. Make sure the waist is cinched tight, really tight. The neckline should be low but tasteful, you know? And the back, the back needs to be dramatic. Everyone remembers a dramatic back. I wrote everything down in my notebook, the same leather-bound notebook I'd been using since high school. It was battered now, filled with sketches and measurements and notes from hundreds of clients over the years. a habit of meticulous documentation that had served me well. I need to grab another notebook from my car, I said, setting down my pen. I left my design notebook out there this morning. I'll just be a minute. Sure, Mom said, already pulling up photos on her phone to show Lexi. We'll be here. I headed out the door and down the narrow staircase to the street where I'd parked. The afternoon sun was bright, almost aggressive. I found my notebook wedged between the passenger seat and the center console, grabbed it, and headed back up. The studio door was slightly ajar. I'd left it that way for the breeze. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard Lexi's voice, clear as crystal, and absolutely dripping with disdain. I can't stand it. Her tone was petulant, whiny. Just because you spent all the money prepared for this pageant on filler injections, now I don't have enough money to hire a famous designer and have to hole up in this tiny, pathetic studio. I froze, one hand on the doorframe. Don't worry, Mom's voice replied, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. It was sweet, so sweet, but with an edge underneath that I'd never heard before. We'll say it's a design by an anonymous French designer. No one will know it was sewn by that failure. Failure. The word hit me like a physical blow. I have to look beautiful for the interviews too. Mom continued. If you're the beauty queen, I'll be appearing in the same frame. After all, those fillers were an investment in both our futures. Lexi laughed. High and cruel. Can you imagine if people knew Harper made this? It would be so embarrassing. She's so basic, so ordinary. Well, she has her uses, Mom said. She's always been eager to please. That's why I raised her that way. Someone has to be the worker bee while you're the queen, darling. I stood at the threshold, notebook clutched in my hand, and felt something inside me shatter completely. Not crack shatter. Like a window struck by a stone, spiderwebbing into 1,000 irreparable pieces. 11 years. 11 years of swallowing my resentment, of telling myself that family came first, that my mother loved me in her own way, that my sacrifices mattered. 11 years of believing that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, worked enough, I'd earn the same affection she showered on Lexi. But I'd never had it. I'd never even been close. I was useful. That's all I'd ever been. A tool. A resource to be exploited. A failure who could at least sew. Something shifted inside me, something fundamental and irreversible. It felt like waking up from a dream, or maybe like surfacing from underwater after being held down too long. Clarity, cold and sharp as a blade. My sacrifice was not a duty, it was stupidity. And I was done being stupid. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and forced my face into a neutral expression. Then I pushed the door open a little wider, making sure it creaked, and walked in with my eyes on my notebook like I'd been reading it the whole time. Found it, I said brightly. Sorry about that. I'm so scattered lately. Lexi and Mom had jumped apart slightly, their expressions shifting with practiced ease into something natural and warm. If I hadn't heard what I'd just heard, I might have believed they'd been discussing nail polish colors or something equally benign. No problem, sweetie, Mom said, her smile perfect. We were just talking about how excited we are to see what you create. Absolutely, Lexi chimed in. I know you're going to make me something amazing. I smiled back. It felt like my face might crack from the effort. I'll do my best. We spent another 30 minutes going over Lexi's vision for the dress. She wanted drama. She wanted glamour. She wanted something that would make the judges weep. She showed me a dozen reference photos, all from designers whose assistants made more in a month than I'd made in the past year. Emerald green, definitely, she said. It brings out my eyes. Beading on the bodice, Mom added. Lots of sparkle. And the skirt needs to move beautifully. Like, flowing and romantic, but also structured enough to photograph well. I wrote it all down, nodding in all the right places, asking all the right questions, playing the part of the devoted sister, the reliable seamstress, the family workhorse. When they finally left, Lexi gave me an air kiss near my cheek. You're the best, Harper. I don't know what I'd do without you. Mom squeezed my hand. This is going to be wonderful. I just know it. The door closed. The bell chimed. And I stood in the middle of my studio, surrounded by fabric and thread and the ghosts of every dream I'd deferred, feeling nothing at all. Then I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over the text app, But typing felt too passive for the rage vibrating under my skin. I needed to hear a human voice. I hit the speed dial for O'Brien. O'Brien Mitchell had been my best friend for years. We'd actually met through a community for textile and fashion enthusiasts, a collective of fabric geeks who cared more about fiber content than current trends. I had posted a complex question about the structural integrity of bias-cut silk, and O'Brien was the only one who replied with a detailed engineering analysis, rather than a guess. We decided to meet for coffee to continue the debate, stayed until the shop closed arguing about weave patterns, and had been inseparable ever since. Most people thought we were dating. We'd never been anything but friends, but we had that rare kind of friendship that felt like family, the kind you choose, not the kind you're stuck with. O'Brien was brilliant. Genuinely, objectively brilliant. He worked for a major sportswear corporation now, doing research and development on performance fabrics. He'd tried, many times over the years, to get me to apply for positions at his company. "You're better than this," he'd say, gesturing at my cramped studio. "You should be designing for real brands, Harper. You have the talent." But I'd always been too afraid, too convinced I wasn't good enough. What an idiot I'd been. He picked up on the second ring. "Harper? Everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No, O'Brien, it's not." And then I told him. Everything. I paced the length of my tiny studio, clutching the phone like a lifeline, and poured it all out: the demand for the dress, the anonymous French designer scheme, and the conversation I'd overheard on the stairs. When I got to the part about my mother calling me a failure, my voice cracked. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, O'Brien's voice came through, low and dangerous. "That failure comment. Harper, you know that's garbage, right? You're one of the most talented designers I've ever met." "Doesn't matter," I said, wiping a tear from my cheek with the back of my hand. "What matters is that I've been an idiot for 11 years, and I'm done." Done how? I stopped pacing and looked at the dress form standing in the corner. I'm going to make the dress. I'm going to make it perfect. And I'm going to make sure my sister never forgets the favor I did her. I want to create something so beautiful that when it all falls apart, no one can say I didn't give it my absolute best. "Falls apart," O'Brien repeated slowly. "Literally?" "Ideally." I could practically hear his engineer's brain shifting gears, the click and whir of calculation replacing his anger. After a moment, he spoke again, his tone sharp with a new idea. "I might have something that could help," he said. "What is it?" "Better if I show you. I need a week." "A week?" "Trust me, Harper. It'll be worth the wait." "Meet me next Saturday? The usual place?" "I'll be there," I said. The following Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I met O'Brien at our favorite cafe, a tiny place called Brewed Awakening, that served genuinely good coffee and made the best blueberry scones in the state. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual corner table with 2 large coffees and a scone he'd split in half. O'Brien was the kind of handsome that snuck up on you, not flashy like the guys Lexi dated, but solid and real, with warm brown eyes and the kind of steady presence that made you feel safe. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting, pushing a coffee toward me. "Thanks, you're a real charmer." I took a long sip of the hot coffee, letting the caffeine settle my nerves. "So? Do you have it?" O'Brien reached into his bag and set a small package wrapped in plain paper on the table between us. He unwrapped it to reveal a small spool of thread preserved in an airtight container. To the untrained eye, it looked like standard polyester, the kind you could grab at any Joann Fabrics for $3. But I knew O'Brien better than that. "This," he said, his voice low and intense, "is high-sensitivity soluble thread. This isn't experimental, and it's not magic," he said, tapping the spool with his index finger. "It's just incredibly obscure. It's a specific type of industrial vanishing basting thread." I leaned forward, studying the innocent-looking spool. Soluble like, dissolving in water? O'Brien's grin widened, sharp and knowing. "That's the beauty of it. It just needs a microclimate of high heat and moisture to destabilize the polymer chain. Like, say, the environment created between a tight corset and a nervous, sweating body under 4,000 watts of stage lighting." I stared at the spool, my mind racing as the chemistry clicked into place. He said, "It won't break immediately. It needs time to soften. Under stage conditions, with the heat trapped against her skin, I'd estimate the degradation would start within a minute or two. Full structural failure in 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the stress load. And it's safe? It won't hurt her skin? It's basically just a specialized plastic, completely non-toxic. The worst that happens is it turns a little gummy before it gives up the ghost. He pushed the spool toward me across the scarred wooden table. It's a legitimate product, Harper. Just applied creatively. The question is, are you sure you want to do this? I picked up the spool, feeling the weight of it in my palm. It looked so innocent, so ordinary, just a tool of the trade, repurposed for justice. But as I sat there, I remembered my mother's voice, that failure. I remembered Lexi's laugh. I remembered 11 years of sacrificed dreams and stolen futures. I'm sure, I said. O'Brien nodded slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Then let's make your sister shine. The first night after O'Brien handed me that spool of high-sensitivity soluble thread, I didn't sleep. I sat at my drafting table under the harsh fluorescent light, sketching and re-sketching until my hand cramped and my vision blurred. This dress wouldn't just be beautiful, it would be my magnum opus, both literally and figuratively. Every line I drew was deliberate, every bead placement calculated. Every seam, a potential point of catastrophic failure. I lost track of time. Days bled into nights. I survived on black coffee and the kind of manic energy that comes from finally having a plan. My small studio became a war room, fabric samples and thread spools scattered across every surface like ammunition. Of course, Deborah couldn't leave me alone. She started showing up unannounced, sometimes twice a day, always with that saccharine smile plastered across her face. Just checking in on my talented daughter, she'd coo, before immediately launching into criticisms disguised as suggestions. Don't you think it needs more sparkle, Harper? Lexi needs to shine brighter than everyone else. The train looks a bit ordinary. Can you make it more grand? More dramatic? Each visit, each demand, each thinly veiled insult, they all fed the fire burning in my chest. What Deborah didn't realize was that she was accelerating the process of her own daughter's downfall. Every upgrade she requested meant more weight, more stress points, more opportunities for the soluble thread to do its work. I smiled through it all. A calm, serene smile that must have unsettled her, though she was too self-absorbed to notice. Of course, Mom. Whatever Lexi needs. You're right. More crystals would be stunning. I'll redesign the train tonight. I was no longer the anxious, eager-to-please daughter she'd manipulated for years. I was a hunter setting a trap, and my prey was walking straight into it. After 1 week of constant revisions, we finalized the last sketch. I held it up to the light, pretending to admire it with maternal pride, while internally cataloging every expensive detail I'd deliberately incorporated. Hand-beaded bodice, imported French lace. Swarovski crystals cascading down the skirt. A 6-foot train with hand-embroidered flowers that would require hundreds of hours to complete. It was obscenely extravagant. It was going to cost a fortune. Perfect. It's beautiful, Deborah breathed, actually tearing up. Lexi is going to look like a princess. She deserves nothing less, I said, and meant every word, just not in the way my mother thought. To sell the illusion completely, I did something that should have been unthinkable. I withdrew my entire savings account. Every penny I'd scraped together, every dollar I'd set aside to pay next month's studio rent gone. I marched into the most expensive fabric store in the city and bought the finest imported stones, the most delicate imported lace, the highest quality everything. When I showed Deborah the receipts, her eyes went wide. Harper, this is too much. You didn't have to. I wanted to, I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. She's my sister. I'm all in for Lexi. The words tasted like ash, but they had the desired effect. Deborah's suspicion melted into approval. She actually hugged me, a rare occurrence that made my skin crawl. You're a good daughter, Harper. A good sister. I returned the embrace, thinking about my stolen college fund. 11 years. 11 years of being the good daughter, while they took and took and took. Not anymore. Back in my studio, I laid out all the materials like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. The emerald green silk gleamed under my work lights. The crystals caught the light and threw rainbow fractals across my walls. Everything was exquisite. Everything was expensive. Everything was going to unravel. I got to work. My hands moved with the confidence of 15 years of experience. I'd been sewing since I was 15, had studied fashion design obsessively even without formal education. Every technique I'd taught myself, every skill I'd honed in this cramped little studio, it all came together now. The bodice took shape first. I constructed it with architectural precision, creating a structured foundation that would support hundreds of crystals. But here's where my specialized knowledge came into play. At critical stress points, the shoulder seams, the side panels, the places where weight and movement would create maximum tension, I alternated between normal thread and O'Brien's special soluble thread, not obviously. Nothing that would show up in a casual inspection or even a careful try-on. The soluble thread was nearly identical in appearance to standard polyester thread. But it had one crucial difference. It was designed to break down when exposed to sustained heat and moisture, human body heat, sweat, stage lights. And then, at the worst possible moment, everything would give way. I worked 18-hour days. My fingers ached, my eyes burned. I survived on takeout and coffee. The skirt came together next layers of emerald silk that transitioned into a breathtaking white-blue ombre effect. I hand-embroidered delicate flowers that seemed to float across the fabric. Each stitch was perfect, and woven throughout, invisible and deadly, was O'Brien's gift. 1 month later, I stepped back from my work table and stared at what I'd created. It was breathtaking. The emerald green gown shimmered like gemstones. The bodice was a masterpiece of beadwork, each crystal positioned to catch light from every angle. The skirt flowed like water, the ombre effect creating an ethereal, almost magical quality. The train was a work of art, 6 feet of hand-embroidered lace that seemed to glow. I'd poured every ounce of my skill into this dress. It was, without exaggeration, the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. It was also a ticking time bomb. I called Deborah. "It's ready." They came within the hour. The moment Lexi saw the dress hanging on my dress form, she actually gasped. "Harper. Oh my gosh, Harper, it's incredible." For a moment, just a brief, traitorous moment, I felt a flicker of pride. Not for Lexi, but for my own work. I'd created something extraordinary. Then Lexi tried it on, and that flicker died. She preened in front of my full-length mirror, turning this way and that, completely absorbed in her own reflection. Not once did she thank me. Not once did she acknowledge the month of sleepless nights, the drained savings account, the skill required to create something this complex. "It's perfect," Deborah declared, misty-eyed. "You've outdone yourself, Harper, and I need you backstage on pageant night to help Lexi into the dress. It's so intricate, and we can't trust anyone else with it." Even if my mother hadn't asked, I would have found an excuse to serve as Lexi's wardrobe assistant that day. That was the critical moment I needed to be the one to dress her, to ensure that every seam sat exactly as intended, that nothing was disturbed or detected before she walked onto that stage. I met her eyes and smiled. "Of course, Mom. I wouldn't miss it for the world." After they left, I slumped in my chair and stared at my empty bank account on my phone screen. I was broke. Completely, utterly broke. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and I had nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from O'Brien. "How's the masterpiece coming?" "It's done," I typed back. "Everything changes. That's my girl. The wolf is ready to hunt." I looked at the dress. In the dim light of my studio, the emerald silk seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Yes. The wolf was ready. And the lamb had no idea what was coming. The night of the Miss State pageant arrived like an execution date I'd been counting down to for weeks. Backstage was controlled chaos, a hot, airless maze of hairspray fog, half-dressed contestants, and barking stage managers. The air conditioning struggled against the combined heat of bodies, stage lights bleeding through from the main hall, and enough electrical equipment to power a small city. Within minutes of arriving, I was already sweating through my black t-shirt. Perfect conditions. I found Lexi in the designated dressing area, surrounded by her entourage like a queen holding court. Her hair was already styled in an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless. When she saw me carrying the garment bag, her eyes lit up with the kind of hunger I'd seen 1,000 times, the look of someone who believes beautiful things are simply owed to them. "Finally," she said, not even greeting me. I've been waiting. Everyone else has been ready for 20 minutes. I bit back a dozen responses and simply unzipped the garment bag with ceremonial slowness. The emerald dress emerged like a serpent uncoiling, and even in the harsh fluorescent backstage lighting, it was stunning. Several nearby contestants actually stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Oh my gosh," one of them whispered. "That's incredible." Lexi's smile turned smug. I helped her step into the dress, my hands steady despite my racing heart. The bodice settled into place. I began the intricate process of fastening the hidden hooks and lacing the internal corset structure. My fingers brushed against the shoulder seams where the soluble thread lay hidden, invisible among the normal stitching. "Careful," I murmured, playing my role. "The dress is beaded very intricately, and the corset structure inside is very tight. Please be gentle with it." Lexi met my eyes in the mirror, and for a moment, I saw something ugly flicker across her perfect face. She leaned in close, her lips nearly touching my ear, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. "I was born to perform. The stage is my home. Don't act like you know anything. Why would a nameless seamstress want to teach Lexi how to shine?" The words were designed to cut, and they did, but not in the way she intended. They didn't wound me, they crystallized my resolve into something diamond hard. I stepped back, expression neutral. "Break a leg out there, sis." Before Lexi could respond, Deborah appeared at her elbow, eyes sharp. "Harper, move along, find somewhere out of the way to wait." As I turned to leave, I caught sight of what had prompted Deborah's urgency. Two people with press badges were weaving through the backstage crowd, heading straight for Lexi. One carried a professional camera, the other held up a phone live streaming, from the looks of it. Of course. The dress was too spectacular not to attract attention. I melted into the shadows behind a rack of costume changes, close enough to watch but far enough to be forgotten. Classic invisibility, a skill I'd perfected over 30 years. The reporter, a blonde woman in a crisp pantsuit, positioned herself in front of Lexi with the ease of someone who'd done 1,000 of these interviews. "We're here with contestant number 17, Lexi Vance, who is absolutely stunning in this incredible gown. Lexi, can you tell us about your dress? It's unlike anything we've seen tonight." Lexi's pageant smile clicked into place, bright, warm, utterly fake. "Thank you so much. Yes, this dress is very special to me. It's actually a gift from an anonymous designer in Paris." She touched the beaded bodice delicately, reverently. "He said that only my beauty was worthy of wearing his creation." My jaw clenched so hard I heard my teeth grind. An anonymous Parisian designer? The reporter's eyes sparkled with interest. How mysterious. How did this come about? "I can't share all the details," Lexi said with a conspiratorial smile. "But let's just say that when you're dedicated to your craft and you shine brightly enough, the right people notice." He reached out to my team and insisted on creating something custom for tonight. The reporter ate it up. "It's absolutely breathtaking. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The beading alone must have taken hundreds of hours." "He's a true artist," Lexi agreed, executing a slow turn to show off the dress's full glory. The camera captured every angle, every glittering crystal. I'm just honored to be his muse. I watched my mother stand beside Lexi, beaming with pride, nodding along to every lie. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, careful to keep the screen dimmed. "O'Brien, watching the live stream. Anonymous French designer, your sister is really good at telling fairy tales." The dress is the center of heated discussion, and hundreds of viewers tuning in are already predicting she'll be crowned this year's beauty queen, eagerly waiting to see the gown revealed on stage in just a few minutes. I sent back a laughing emoji. He was probably at home right now, feet up, beer in hand, watching the drama unfold in real time. He'd played a crucial role in this revenge, and he knew it. We'd discussed the timeline endlessly, how long the thread would take to break down under optimal conditions, what optimal even meant in this context: heat, sweat, movement, pressure. All the things a nervous pageant contestant under stage lights would generate in abundance. I glanced at my watch. 7:47 p.m. The pageant was scheduled to start at 8, with Lexi performing in the middle group probably around 8:30 or 8:45. The stage lights would need time to work their magic. Body temperature would need to rise. Sweat would need to saturate the internal lining. The moment was approaching. I found a corner near the stage entrance that was slightly less claustrophobic than the main backstage area, close enough to an exterior door that I caught occasional drafts of cool night air. Even here, even with better ventilation, I felt the oppressive heat. My shirt stuck to my back. My hair frizzed in the humidity. If I was hot, Lexi in that elaborate gown with its corseted bodice and multiple layers had to be absolutely sweltering. The thought made me smile. I pulled out my phone and pretended to scroll through social media, but really, I was watching the clock, watching the stage managers organize contestants into performance order. Watching Lexi get increasingly flushed as she stood under the backstage lights in dozens of pounds of silk and crystals. At 8:20, a stage manager with a clipboard and a headset approached Lexi's group. "Middle group, you're up in 15 minutes. Start making your way to stage right entrance." Lexi's hand fluttered to her throat. Even from my distant corner, I could see the anxiety in her posture. This was the biggest moment of her pageant career, the performance she'd been building toward for years. She reached for a bottle of water, but Deborah intercepted her hand. "No, you'll ruin your lipstick, and we don't have time to fix it." Lexi nodded, swallowing hard. The dress glittered under the lights, looking more magnificent with every passing minute. Several contestants openly stared at it with expressions of envy and resignation. They knew they were competing against something extraordinary. If only they knew. At 8:32, the lights in the backstage area dimmed slightly. On the other side of the curtain, I heard the muffled roar of applause. The opening group had finished. In the brief pause before the middle group took the stage, I heard the MC's voice boom over the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be dazzled by our next group of talented contestants." Stage managers began ushering Lexi's group toward the entrance. My sister took her position, shoulders back, pageant smile firmly in place. But her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She was nervous, desperate for victory. One by one, the contestants walked onto the stage to their individual introductions. The crowd's reaction was audible even through the heavy curtains, appreciative applause, some whistles, the general enthusiasm of a pageant audience. Then it was Lexi's turn. Contestant number 17, Lexi Vance. She stepped through the curtain, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and thunderous. Even I had to admit she knew how to work a stage. Her walk was confident, her smile radiant, her poses calculated to show the dress from every breathtaking angle. The stage lights hit her, and the entire gown came alive. The emerald silk seemed to glow from within. The crystals created a dazzling light show with every movement, throwing sparkles across the stage and into the audience. The ombre skirt shifted from green to white to blue like magical water, and the train flowed behind her like sea foam. She was a vision, a star. The crowd went wild. I edged closer to the stage entrance where I could see through a gap in the curtain. Lexi executed a series of turns, showing off her curves, letting the dress work its magic. Under the intense spotlights, which had to be putting out serious heat, she was beginning to really sweat. I could see it even from backstage, the way her skin glistened, the way she occasionally touched her collarbone to discreetly wipe moisture away. The weight of hundreds of crystals attached to the bodice was putting constant pressure on the seams. Every movement, every pose, every turn created tension, stress, strain. And deep in those seams, invisible to every eye but mine, the soluble thread was beginning to disintegrate, minute by minute, fiber by fiber. I checked my watch. 8:43 p.m., any moment now. Lexi struck another pose, arching her back to emphasize the dress's silhouette. The crowd applauded. She smiled wider, feeding off their energy, pushing herself to perform even harder. She had no idea she was standing on a crumbling foundation, that her moment of triumph was about to become her worst nightmare, that her anonymous Parisian designer was watching from the shadows, waiting for the masterpiece to complete itself. I held my phone loosely in my hand, ready to record. The wolf had been patient. Now it was time to watch the lamb fall. The second minute on stage arrived like destiny keeping an appointment. I watched from the wings, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Lexi executed her choreographed turn, the one she'd practiced 100 times in our mother's living room, and the emerald fabric caught the light like liquid fire. The audience erupted in applause. The spotlights bore down on her, each lamp adding another degree of heat to the chemical equation I'd engineered. Then I saw it, the slight shift in her posture, the microsecond of confusion that flickered across her face, the shoulder seam, the one I'd sewn entirely with O'Brien's miracle thread, gave way with perfect, silent precision. One side of the bodice slipped, exposing Lexi's entire left shoulder blade and the elegant slope of her back. The emerald silk draped asymmetrically now, hanging from just one shoulder like some avant-garde masterpiece. The audience gasped, then exploded into even louder applause. I could hear their excited carrying backstage. "It's transforming! Oh my gosh, it's a reveal design. That French designer is a genius." I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from laughing. They thought it was intentional. They thought this was art. Lexi's eyes went wide with panic. I could see it even from my position in the shadows. Her smile turned brittle, frozen on her face like a mask. But she couldn't stop. The music was still playing. The cameras were still rolling. Thousands of people were watching the live stream. She had to keep moving, keep smiling, keep pretending this was all part of the plan. The cheering grew louder, more enthusiastic. The judges were leaning forward in their seats, scribbling notes. Sébastien Laurent, the CEO of the luxury fashion brand sponsoring the entire pageant, sat in the front row with an unreadable expression on his distinguished face. Lexi executed final twirl. The emerald train swirling around her legs like ocean waves. Her body temperature had risen. Her nervous sweat had saturated the carefully weakened seams. Every stitch I'd placed with surgical precision had now completed its chemical mission, and the sweat beginning to bead on her collarbone. The stage lights were doing their job beautifully. Heat and moisture the perfect catalyst. The another bodice gave way all at once. The entire top half of the dress, that masterpiece I'd spent a month creating, that work of art that had consumed my savings and my sleep, slid down her torso like melting ice cream. It caught at her hips, the train pooling around her feet in a treacherous pile of emerald silk. Lexi's scream cut through the applause like a knife. Her hands flew up instinctively, one arm across her chest, the other grasping desperately at the falling fabric. But the dress was already gone, collapsed around her ankles in a gorgeous, ruinous heap. And there, revealed to the entire state, and everyone watching the live stream, was the unflattering truth beneath the beauty queen facade: a beige Spanx bodysuit. Industrial strength shapewear that compressed and smoothed and held everything in place. The kind of undergarment that turns a human body into a mannequin, practical and graceless and utterly, devastatingly unglamorous. Lexi tried to pull the dress back up, stumbling forward in her stilettos. Her heel caught in the pile of silk. She went down hard on one knee, her carefully styled hair falling into her face, her makeup-perfect expression shattered into raw panic. The audience sat in stunned silence for one crystalline moment. Then the chaos erupted. Stagehands rushed forward with blankets. The host was stammering into his microphone, trying to fill the dead air. The music cut off abruptly, leaving only the sound of Lexi's sobbing and the clicking of 1,000 phone cameras. Someone in the audience started laughing, a nervous, disbelieving sound that spread like wildfire through the venue. I looked down into the front rows and found my mother. Deborah sat frozen in her seat, her face the color of old paper, her mouth hung open in a silent scream. The woman who had spent 23 years grooming her perfect daughter for this exact moment was watching that daughter's humiliation broadcast live the United States. I felt absolutely nothing. No, that's not true. I felt satisfied. Free. I turned away from the stage and walked calmly toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear the beginning of what would become the viral sensation of the year. I drove home through empty streets, the adrenaline finally beginning to fade from my system. My hands shook slightly on the steering wheel. I'd done it. After 11 years of swallowing my rage, after a lifetime of being invisible, after watching my mother steal my future and hand it to my sister on a silver platter, I'd finally made them pay. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The knock on my studio door came at 9 o'clock the next morning. I was still in my pajamas, drinking coffee and scrolling through the online carnage. The pageant disaster was trending on every platform. Someone had already created a GIF of Lexi's dress falling off, set it to comedic music, and gotten 3 million views. The comments were merciless. The knock came again, polite but insistent. I opened the door and found a woman in an immaculate gray suit standing in my hallway. She was maybe 35, with sharp eyes and an iPad clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. "Harper Vance?" she asked. "Yes." "My name is Catherine Mills. I'm the personal assistant to Sébastien Laurent. CEO of Laurent Luxe Fashion House. Mr. Laurent would like to meet with you this morning, if you're available. My coffee mug froze halfway to my mouth. I'm sorry, what? Catherine's expression didn't change. Mr. Laurent was the primary sponsor of last night's pageant. He's currently staying at the Grandview Hotel downtown. He's requested a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. I have a car waiting downstairs. I stared at her. My brain struggled to process this information. Sebastian Laurent, the Sebastian Laurent, fashion industry legend, wanted to meet with me? The makeup and wardrobe assistant listed in tiny print in the pageant program? Why? I managed to ask. Catherine smiled slightly. I think Mr. Laurent would prefer to explain that himself. Shall I tell him you'll come? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of a black town car, still slightly dazed, heading toward the most expensive hotel in the city. The suite they led me to was bigger than my entire studio apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the downtown skyline. Sebastian Laurent stood by those windows, holding something in his hands. As I entered, he turned to face me. He was older than he looked in photographs, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of elegant presence that comes from decades of commanding respect. He wore a simple black sweater and tailored slacks, but it haute couture. In his hands was my dress, or rather, what remained of it. The emerald silk, now carefully laid out and examined, every seam exposed. Miss Vance, he said, his voice carrying a faint French accent. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sebastian held up the dress, studying it with the concentration of a surgeon examining an X-ray. His fingers traced the destroyed seams, the strategic weak points, the places where I deliberately used the soluble thread. Ignoring last night's unfortunate incident, he said slowly, I must tell you that I find this construction technique absolutely masterful. This is not the work of an amateur. The way the bodice is structured, the engineering of the train, the coordination of movement and fabric weight, this demonstrates natural-born talent. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp and knowing. And the way you calculated the stress points, so that the garment would fail at the exact moment of maximum impact during the final turn, under hot lights, at peak physical exertion, that is the mindset of an architect. Miss Vance, not merely a tailor. My mouth went dry. He knew. He knew exactly what I'd done. I saw your name listed in the pageant program, Sebastian continued. Makeup and wardrobe assistant for contestant Lexi Vance. Your sister, I presume. He didn't wait for me to answer. The program claimed the dress was created by an anonymous French designer. A fiction, clearly. No French designer of any reputation would create something like this and remain anonymous. He set the dress down carefully on a nearby table and turned to face me fully. In this industry, Miss Vance, talent alone is insufficient. One must also possess vision, determination, and yes, a certain calculated ruthlessness, the ability to see an opportunity and seize it without hesitation. The courage to take risks. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You engineered a disaster that will be remembered for years. You humiliated your competitor on a stage. And you did it with such technical precision that it could almost be admired. I found my voice finally. Are you here to threaten me with legal action? Legal action? Sebastian laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. No, Miss Vance. I'm here to offer you a job. The room tilted slightly. I'm sorry? You heard me correctly. I want you to join Laurent Luxe as a senior design assistant. Full salary, full benefits, and we will cover your tuition at any fashion academy you wish to attend. New York, Paris, Milan, your choice. You have raw talent that needs refinement, but the foundation is extraordinary. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I destroyed your pageant. You destroyed a beauty queen who lied about her dress designer, Sebastian corrected. You exposed fraud and pretension. In my world, Miss Vance, authenticity is everything. Your sister claimed credit for work she didn't do and expertise she doesn't possess. That kind of dishonesty is poison to the industry. He moved to the window, looking out over the city. You, on the other hand, demonstrated genuine skill and the kind of bold, strategic thinking I value. You're a little wolf, Miss Vance, and I respect that. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. This wasn't how revenge was supposed to work. I was supposed to destroy my sister and then disappear back into obscurity. I wasn't supposed to be discovered. Rewarded. Think about it, Sebastian said, pulling a business card from his pocket and setting it on the table beside the ruined dress. My offer stands for 48 hours. After that, I'll assume you're not interested. He walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Vance, I understand family betrayal. I understand what it means to be overlooked and underestimated. What you did last night was not kind, but it was honest, and in the end, honesty is what survives. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my destroyed masterpiece and an impossible future suddenly within reach. The video went viral within 12 hours. By the time I left Sébastien Laurent's hotel suite, Beauty Queen wardrobe malfunction was trending on every social media platform in North America. Someone had edited the footage to show Lexi's confident walk, the dress transformation, and then the catastrophic failure all set to circus music. It had been shared 40 million times. The comments were savage. This is what happens when you fake everything for the camera. That Spanx reveal, though. I'm deceased. Lexi tried to defend herself on Instagram, posting a tearful video claiming she'd been deceived by someone claiming to be a French designer and that she was just as much a victim as anyone, but the internet was merciless. Every comment section filled with variations of the same message. Stop lying. Just stop. Imagine lying about having a French designer, and then this happens. Karma is undefeated. The pageant mom forums, where Deborah had been a prolific poster for years, turned against her. Other mothers who'd watched her brag about Lexi's success and dismiss other girls' accomplishments suddenly felt vindicated. Someone dug up old posts where Deborah had mocked contestants who wore obviously homemade dresses. The hypocrisy was delicious. The pageant mom forums, where Deborah had been a prolific poster for years, turned against her. Other mothers who'd watched her brag about Lexi's success and dismiss other girls' accomplishments suddenly felt vindicated. Someone dug up old posts where Deborah had mocked contestants who wore obviously homemade dresses. The hypocrisy was delicious. I sat in my studio that afternoon, scrolling through the carnage with my coffee going cold beside me. Lexi's Instagram had been flooded with mocking comments. Someone had created a fake account called The Anonymous French Designer that was posting memes about the incident. The pageant organization had released a carefully worded statement expressing sympathy while subtly distancing themselves from Lexi's misrepresentation of her design team. My phone rang. My mother's number appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, and again. Finally, I picked up. What? Harper. Deborah's voice was shrill, barely controlled. What did you do? I made a dress, I said calmly. Exactly like Lexi asked me to. Don't play games with me. That dress fell apart on purpose. You sabotaged your own sister. Did I? I took a sip of my coffee. That's a serious accusation, Mother. Do you have any proof? Silence on the other end. Because of course she didn't. The dress was gone, confiscated by Sébastien Laurent. Any investigation would be impossible. And even if they could prove sabotage, what were they going to do? Sue me? Expose to the world that the anonymous French designer was actually Lexi's struggling seamstress sister, who they'd treated like garbage for decades? You're a monster, Deborah whispered. No, I said quietly. I'm just done being your victim. Don't call me again. I hung up and blocked both their numbers. Then I called Sebastian and said I accepted the job offer. Within a week, the full story began to emerge. Some enterprising journalist had done actual investigative work and discovered that no French designer had been involved in creating Lexi's dress. They'd tracked down the pageant's registration paperwork and found my name listed as wardrobe assistant. They'd interviewed other contestants who confirmed that I'd been backstage working. The narrative shifted from unfortunate wardrobe malfunction to beauty queen caught in elaborate lie. Lexi withdrew from the pageant circuit entirely. Her Instagram, once full of sponsored posts and beauty shots, went dark. Deborah stopped posting on social media altogether. I felt nothing but relief. The check from Laurent Luxe arrived on Monday, my signing bonus enough to cover 3 months of rent and living expenses while I transitioned into my new role. Catherine Mills called the next day, with details about my enrollment at the Fashion Institute. Full tuition, covered, a stipend for materials and supplies, access to workshops and master classes with industry professionals. Mr. Laurent doesn't invest in people lightly, Catherine told me. He sees something in you. Don't waste this opportunity. I had no intention of wasting anything ever again. O'Brien took me out for celebratory drinks when I told him the news. We sat in our usual dive bar, the one with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played country music, and he raised his beer in a toast. To the wolf, he said, grinning. I knew you had it in you. I couldn't have done it without your magic. 3 had something they didn't. Hunger, desperation, a bone-deep need to prove that I deserved to be there. My technical skills improved rapidly under professional instruction. Sebastian occasionally stopped by the studio to review my work, offering critiques that were harsh but always fair. I learned to trust, to take risks, to create beauty without armor. My portfolio grew. Small pieces at first, accessories, accent garments for the company's secondary line, then larger projects. A coat that ended up in a magazine editorial, a dress that a minor celebrity wore to a film premiere. Each success felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. I never heard from Lexi or Deborah again. I occasionally wondered what they were doing, how they were coping with their spectacular fall from grace, but mostly, I just didn't care anymore. They'd taken up so much space in my head for so long, poisoning every thought with bitterness and rage. Now they were just irrelevant, ghosts of a past I'd finally escaped. 1 year after the pageant disaster, Sebastian approached me with a new proposal. I want to give you a show, he said simply. Not Fashion Week, not yet. But a smaller showcase, invitation only, featuring emerging designers from the Laurent Luxe Development Program. You'll have creative control over 6 pieces. A capsule collection representing your vision. I said yes before he finished explaining the details. The night of the showcase arrived in early autumn. The venue was an industrial warehouse space that had been transformed with lighting and minimal decoration, letting the clothes be the focus. The guest list was small but influential. Fashion editors, boutique buyers, industry insiders who could make or break emerging careers. I stood backstage, watching my models line up. 6 pieces. 6 different interpretations of strength and vulnerability. Nothing emerald green. I deliberately avoided that color forever. Instead, deep burgundies and midnight blues, architectural cuts softened with flowing elements, garments that were both armor and art. My hands shook slightly as I checked the final details. A seam here, a hemline there. Everything was perfect. Everything was honest. The lights dimmed in the main space. Music began, something instrumental and modern that I'd spent weeks selecting. The first model walked. I watched from the wings as my collection moved down the runway. Each piece represented something I'd learned this year. Technical skill, artistic courage, the confidence to trust my instincts. The audience watched in attentive silence, and I couldn't tell if that was good or terrifying. The final model walked. The music faded. Applause filled the space, genuine, enthusiastic applause. Catherine appeared at my elbow. You're supposed to take your bow, she whispered. Right. I'd forgotten that part. I walked out onto the runway on shaking legs, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see faces, just shapes and shadows and the occasional flash of a phone camera. Then my eyes adjusted, and I found the front row. Sebastian sat there with his usual composed expression, but his eyes were warm as he applauded. Next to him, O'Brien pumped his fist in the air like we were at a football game instead of a fashion showcase. Several editors were taking notes. A woman I recognized from a major fashion blog was already typing on her phone. I took a deep breath, looking out at the room full of strangers who'd come to see my work. Not my sister's work. Not some anonymous French designer's work. Mine. This was my place. These people, this work, this moment, this was home.